Welcome to Part 6 of Ridgewood. Visit brooksaudiobooks.com for an awesome collection of unique, full-length audiobooks. And be sure to subscribe to be notified when new books are released. Chapter 21. As Henry perched in the treetop, scanning the island for any squatters who might disrupt their rice gathering, he noticed something that sparked a fresh idea. Before his watch was over, he had resolved to do something clever that would surprise and delight his friends. What caught his eye was nothing extraordinary, just a calf, or rather a young bull, roughly a year old, grazing at the edge of a thicket about half a mile west of the camp and not far from the shore. While such a sight was not particularly unusual, the situation surrounding it was unique, and it set Henry's mind racing. First, he recalled what Tom and Sam had mentioned about the wild cattle that roamed the island. It had been many years since the original herd was left behind, so Henry couldn't help but see this yearling bull as more than just a livestock animal. This was game, a wild creature free to roam across unclaimed land, and hunting it would be just as thrilling as stalking deer or bear. Furthermore, Henry and his friends were genuinely in need of meat. A steady diet of fish, oysters, and similar fare quickly grew tiresome and unappealing. Although Tom's turtle had offered a brief respite from this culinary dullness, it was only a partial solution, and the boys were eager for something heartier: beef, mutton, or pork. They had made no attempt to seek out such meat simply because they hadn't realized it was available. The once-enjoyed snake dinner had not been replicated. While the snake had been tasty, the boys had truly meant it when they said they enjoyed it. But that was while their hunger still held sway, and once they had finished eating, their earlier eagerness gave way to the weight of their full stomachs. The old objections returned, and all three boys experienced a strange aversion to the food they had just consumed. Perhaps it was simply that they had eaten too much. Whatever the reason, the reality was that the thought of what they had eaten now turned their stomachs. Though they didn't voice their discomfort, none of them ever suggested trying snake again. Henry, however, was determined to secure a supply of meat that would draw no such objections. There was a plump young steer nearby, ripe for the taking. Figuring out how to obtain it posed an initial challenge. There was no gun to take down the bullock, nor were there any dogs in the camp to chase it. Yet after some thought, Henry became confident he could handle the situation with the tools at hand. He kept his plans to himself when his friends returned to camp, wanting to give them a complete surprise. He simply stated that he wished to go on a little hunting trip, hoping to catch a rabbit or some other worthwhile game. His companions had little faith in such good fortune, but they offered no objections, and Henry set out on his quest, equipped with a hunting knife and a hatchet. He soon spotted the bullock not far from where he had last seen it, peacefully grazing along the edge of the woods. After carefully assessing the situation, Henry ventured into the trees, stealthily making his way through the thick underbrush. His strategy was to approach slowly until he was just a few feet away from his target. Then, with a sudden burst of speed, leap forward to strike the bullock between its young horns with the hatchet. Henry had witnessed a butcher take down a large steer with just a well-placed blow to the animal's head, and he was confident he knew exactly where to hit. As he moved closer, he made sure to keep quiet, but when he was just a dozen feet away from where he intended to leap, he stepped on a stick that snapped underfoot and startled the bullock, which calmly trotted off. While Henry felt a twinge of disappointment, he wasn't discouraged. He simply needed to start over and be more careful next time. He crept forward at a painstaking pace, spending almost half an hour in his approach. This time, he was careful to avoid any sound. Slowly, he drew closer, hearing the bullock's steady breathing, but he needed to get even nearer. A log lay directly in his path, and he realized that he couldn't leap over it without alerting the animal and missing his mark. He carefully maneuvered around the log and succeeded, but just as he was about to strike, the bullock, though unstartled, ambled away to munch on some grass about 10 paces off. This second setback rattled Henry's already taut nerves, but despite his impatience, he managed to regain his composure and continued his silent approach. Fortunately, the bullock's head was turned away from him, significantly reducing the risk of being spotted. He had a good opportunity now, and had he been willing to stick to his initial plan, he might have succeeded in just a moment. Yet, just as he was preparing to leap and deliver his blow, a new thought occurred to him. It would be easier to spring onto the bullock's back, allowing him to deliver not just one blow, but several in quick succession, ensuring a far more decisive outcome. He quickly jumped onto the animal's back, and as he did, the startled creature bolted through the bushes, almost throwing him off. The strike Henry attempted was a complete disaster. He missed the bullock's head entirely, and when the hatchet slipped from his grasp, it flew into the underbrush. There was no time to dwell on the lost hatchet, though. The enraged bullock charged recklessly through the thicket, across an open clearing, and back into the woods in the direction of the camp. Henry had all he could do to stay on. He was battered and bruised by the saplings he scraped against, his face was scratched, and his clothes were ripped nearly to shreds. Still, since the bullock was headed toward the camp, he clung on, convinced that once they arrived, the animal would be caught. Sam and Tom were outside the stockade when Henry rushed by, but there was nothing they could do to help. Just moments later, as they spotted Henry, a low-hanging branch took him off his seat, and the frightened bullock continued its wild dash alone. Sam and Tom rushed over to help their friend. For a moment, Henry seemed dazed, but he quickly recovered enough to ask, with irritation in his voice, "Why didn't you try to stop him?" It wasn't easy to convince Henry that they had been completely unable to catch the bullock, as he had been so determined to secure such a valuable prize. But gradually, he began to see things more clearly and realized that even if Tom and Sam had been ready, they wouldn't have been able to stop the animal. Then Henry checked his own injuries, which were quite serious, though thankfully nothing was broken. "The biggest loss," he said after a moment of reflection, "is the hatchet, and I suppose we'll manage to find that." "Did you lose the hunting knife too?" Sam asked. "There," Henry exclaimed. "What a fool I am, truly. I've had that with me all along, and I could have gotten the beef if I just thought to use it." This was certainly true. As Henry made his way through the thicket, he had enough on his plate simply holding on to the back of the bullock, but once they crossed the open glade, he could have easily pulled out his long hunting knife if it had crossed his mind. Unfortunately, it hadn't, and now it was too late for that kind of thinking to be useful. "It's probably for the best as it is," Tom said. "For the best?" Henry exclaimed. "I don't see how that could be true. I don't know about you, but I could really go for a beefsteak right now." "So could I," Tom replied, "but that yearling isn't ours, and we probably shouldn't kill it." "Why not? It's a wild animal, isn't it?" "I highly doubt it. The squatters must have wiped out all the wild cattle ages ago, and this tame calf likely belongs to them." "Well, they've taken plenty from us, so I wouldn't feel bad if I had taken that animal thinking it was wild," Henry said, a bit regretfully. The search for the hatchet took longer than expected, but they finally found the crucial tool. So, while Henry's attempt to restock the camp larder may not have succeeded, it at least did no real harm beyond leaving him bruised, scratched up, and with torn clothes. Chapter 22. To their surprise, the boys found themselves undisturbed by their enemies following the last failed attempt to burn down their camp. The tar kiln was swiftly rebuilt, and by Saturday night they had a fresh supply of tar ready. Early Monday morning, they began the slow task of turning this tar into pitch by boiling it. The process was particularly drawn out because the kettle was small, and the area to cover was extensive. Their goal was to coat the entire outside of the boat with pitch to make it as watertight as possible. As soon as the first batch of pitch was ready, they carefully applied it while it was still smoking hot, making sure to work it deep into the seams. They set another kettleful to boil and continued this painstaking process. As the pitch cooled, it hardened like varnish, effectively sealing up all the leaks. At first, the boat sat upright, resting on the blocks where it had been built, allowing them to easily move underneath it. However, when they applied the first kettle of pitch, they quickly realized the difficulty of this position and decided to turn the Aphrodite upside down for better access. This was no small task, as the boat was heavy for the three young builders. Nonetheless, it had to be done, and Sam's resourcefulness came to the rescue. He fashioned some long poles to use as levers and gathered a good number of sturdy short sticks. He instructed his friends to lift one side of the boat with the levers. While they held it up, he quickly built 2 cribs from the short sticks, one at the bow and the other at the stern. Once the levers were removed, the boat rested securely on these supports. Then they took another grip with the levers, lifting the side of the boat a few inches higher. Sam built up the cribs to support her in this position and directed the boys to repeat the process again and again, each time raising the height of the cribs to support the boat. At last, he declared, "Just one more adjustment will tip her over, but we need to be ready to ease her down, or we'll strain her." "How do we do that?" Tom asked. "By angling some poles on the cribs. I'll show you." With that, he moved to the opposite side of the boat and constructed some cribs about 5 or 6 feet away from the edge where the boat rested. He lifted these cribs as high as he could reach, taking several straight poles and placing one end on the ground just beneath the edge of the boat, propping the other ends against the tall cribs. This created a slanting framework, where the base was pressed against one edge of the boat and the top barely a few feet from the other edge. "Now," he said once it was complete, "she just needs to fall a foot or 2 forward. At that point, her weight will be on her front, and we can let her down by pulling out the crib supports." "I think there's a better idea," Tom replied. "Oh, what do you suggest?" "Let's push her forward first, then I'll show you." With the boat resting almost on her edge, it was easy to nudge her forward, and after doing so, she was tipped more than halfway over. "Now," Tom said, "instead of lowering that edge, let's raise the other one with the levers and block it up. We only need to raise it a foot. Then she'll reveal her entire underside to us, just as if she were lying flat on her face." "Right," Sam replied, contemplating the plan, "and it will be much easier to flip her back over again." "Do we really have to flip her back over?" Henry asked, feeling the strain in his arms and back from the effort of turning the boat. "Well, not exactly," Tom answered. "If we're okay with launching her upside down and riding back to Ridgewood on her keel, we won't need to. Otherwise, we'll have to right her before we launch." "Flipping her back won't be hard, Henry," Sam reassured him. "She'll be nearly upright, so it should only take a little push rather than a lot of lifting. Now, let's lift this gunwale. I think 6 inches will do." With one more application of the levers, they accomplished the task and resumed applying the pitch. No other major problems arose, and by noon on Thursday, the pitching was finished. Before turning the Aphrodite back around, Sam and his friends cut some long, straight poles and set them up as an inclined plane from the blocks where the boat rested to the water. They stripped the bark from the poles to ensure they were as smooth as possible. Then, the boat was turned around, her side facing the water. Now, they needed to lift her until her keel rested on the inclined plane, allowing her to slide down into the sea on her own weight. This was a challenging task, requiring careful use of the levers and a lot of blocking as they raised the boat inch by inch. Finally, they succeeded, and without any strain or damage, the Aphrodite slipped into the sea, floating gracefully on the water. "3 cheers for our new boat," shouted Henry, and they all joined in with enthusiasm. "All right then," Tom said. "We can finally see the light at the end of our adventures." "Let's see. We just need to make some oars, and then we can be off." "When should we set out?" Sam asked. "Well, this is Thursday evening. We can finish 3 oars, 2 for rowing and 1 for steering, by tomorrow evening." "Then we can leave early Saturday morning," Sam suggested. "Not really," Tom replied. "The tide will be against us until about 1 or half past. The Aphrodite is too heavy for 2 oars against the current." "Why can't all 3 of us row?" Henry interjected, still struggling to grasp the basics of managing a boat. "Because that would leave us with 2 oars on one side and just 1 on the other, and we just spin in circles. We can only use 2 oars while the other steers. This way, we can also take turns resting by switching who has the steering oar." "So we'll leave when the tide turns on Saturday," Sam concluded. "Exactly, or just before that, around noon. That'll give us plenty of time." "And we'll return to Ridgewood," Henry added, just in time to eat with Ma'am Lucy. I wonder if she'll have dinner ready for us. If she doesn't, she'd better whip something up quickly, Tom said. I'm not letting her scold me until she puts supper in front of us, and she won't rest until she gives me a good talking to, as she puts it. Shouldn't we wait until we reach Ridgewood before we start ordering that supper? Sam suggested. There are often unexpected delays, you know. What a pessimist you're becoming, Sam, Henry exclaimed. What could possibly go wrong? We have a good boat, we can make oars tomorrow, and Tom knows the route. Oh, sure, Sam shot back. I'm sure we'll reach there just fine, and I'm not at all trying to be negative. I just think you and Tom might be a bit too optimistic in assuming that everything will go perfectly smooth for us. For the past month, it feels like everything has gone wrong. True, but we've worked through our challenges now, and I can't think of anything that could stop us from leaving on time. If we set off at noon on Saturday, what could possibly prevent us from reaching Ridgewood that evening? I honestly can't say, replied Sam. Nothing, I hope. But given all the mishaps we've experienced, I'm inclined to hold off on celebrating until I see Ma'am Lucy. I want to make sure I'm ready for the supper she's preparing. Chapter 23. Saturday morning arrived soft and warm. After breakfast, the boys cooked the few supplies they had left, planning to have a light lunch on the boat and enjoy a proper meal prepared by Ma'am Lucy when they reached Ridgewood. They filled the coffee pot with drinking water since the water kegs from the Red Bird had been lost in the boat's accident, and loaded their remaining belongings onto the vessel. As soon as the outgoing tide slowed, they set off for home, giving their old camp 3 hearty cheers, parting from their memories there with genuine regret. For the first mile or two, Tom and Sam rowed. Then Henry took over for Tom as the boat moved away from the low-lying marsh islands into the wide stretch of water. The wind was blowing in from the sea steady, if not strong, and after an hour of rowing, Sam noticed that Tom seemed uneasy, his eyes on some light, low-hanging banks of mist racing overhead. "What's wrong, Tom?" Sam asked. "Nothing important, or at least I hope it's not," Tom replied. "Well then, what is it? Do those little clouds mean rain?" "I wish they did," Tom said, "but they're not really clouds, not in the usual sense, and I doubt they signal rain." "Spit it out. We're partners in all our joys and sorrows," Henry chimed in. "So let's hear about these clouds that aren't clouds. What are they?" "A sea fog," Tom explained. "This breeze is coming in from the ocean loaded with moisture, and those clouds just above us are banks of fog." "So, what does that mean?" "We're going to be surrounded by it in 5 minutes," Tom warned. "Look, you can't see half a mile now, and it's settling right down on us, getting thicker by the moment." It was just as Tom said. The thick fog was closing in, leaving them unable to see anything but the expanse of water around them. A few minutes later, even the water was only visible for a short distance around them. "Lay off the oars, guys," said Tom. "Why not keep rowing?" asked Henry. "Because I don't know which way to go, and rowing might lead us off course." "Can't you steer straight ahead?" "No, that would be feasible in a fog if rowing always moved a boat directly forward, and if there weren't any cross currents. But that's not the case. Without a compass, no one can keep a boat on a straight path in this fog. The tide is coming in, so if we don't row, we'll at least drift in the right general direction. If we start rowing, we could end up going completely the wrong way." "How long do you think this fog will stick around?" asked Sam. "It's impossible to say. A change in the wind or the atmosphere could clear it up at any moment, or it could linger for a week." "A week?" Henry exclaimed. "What will we do if it does? We don't have a scrap of food left and only a little water," he said, peering into the coffee pot. "We don't have to plan for the entire week right now," Sam replied. "It's better to stay calm and figure out the best thing to do at every moment. For now, Tom says the best option is to drift with the tide, so that's what we'll do. We'll wait and keep our eyes open for any opportunity to improve our situation." Sam spoke with a cheerful tone, his confidence helping to lift the spirits of his companions. But it was clear to all three that they were facing a serious situation filled with danger and uncertainty. Sam had a remarkable ability to stay strong and brave during tough times. He never let himself panic or act recklessly. "Sam," Henry said after a moment, "I don't think there's a weak bone in you." "I'm not sure," Sam replied, "but I hope there is." What good would complaining do? An hour went by, and the fog only thickened. Another hour passed. The breeze had died down completely, and the grey mist lay over the water like a heavy blanket. It seemed to pile in thick layers, one atop another. It was so dense that the boys could see it drifting between them like smoke from a cigar. They watched its slow, curling movements in the still air, stirred only by their breaths or the occasional shift of their bodies. In such a fog, it would have been impossible to spot a ship even 20 feet away. For yet another hour the boys sat in the boat, barely speaking, hardly interrupting the eerie silence of their fog-bound solitude. Finally, Tom leaned down close to the edge of the boat to scan the water's surface. "I see marsh grass here," he said, "but it's completely submerged. Keep an eye out for any that rises above the surface, and if you see it, grab hold and don't let go." The boys leaned over, one on each side of the boat. Soon, the tips of tall marsh grass emerged above the water, floating slowly past. Several times, Sam and Henry managed to grab small clumps of it, but the force of the drifting boat was too much, pulling the grass up from the muddy bottom. After a little while, the water grew shallower, and the grass rose higher above the surface, becoming more abundant and hindering the boat's movement. Then each of the boys grabbed a handful of grass, and the boat came to a halt. "Now that's better," Tom said, as the movement of the boat stopped. "Why don't you want us to drift?" Sam asked. "Because the tide is about to change," Tom replied, "and I don't want us to end up drifting in the wrong direction." "Then why didn't you anchor the moment you realized we were in shallow water?" Sam pressed. "Because I'd rather not get stuck on a marsh island, if I can avoid it." "I don't get it," Sam said. "Well, you see, it's nearly high tide now, and we've drifted onto one of the many mudbanks covered with this marsh grass. Some of these are under water at high tide, like this one, but they're completely exposed when the tide goes out. When I noticed we were drifting over one, I wanted to stop the boat to avoid being swept back out to sea. But now we risk being stuck high and dry on this mudbank when the tide recedes, and that would put us in quite a predicament. So instead of dropping anchor, we'll just hold on to the grass, and as the tide goes out, we'll try to work our way into deeper water." "Got it," Sam said. "I wish I could see then," Henry said, now feeling more cheerful. "If I could see, I'd aim for Ridgewood." "Come on, Henry," Tom said. "This isn't a joking matter, trust me. It's getting pretty dark now, and unless the fog clears up soon, we might be stuck here in the mud for the night. How about you boys give the oars a few strokes? The tide is falling fast, and we need to get off this bank." The boys began to row slowly, Tom steering and keeping an eye on the water. It was getting shallower, so he turned the boat around, realizing that the route he had chosen was leading them toward the middle of the bank instead of to deeper water. He hadn't gone far in the new direction before the keel scraped the mud, forcing yet another adjustment in their course. No matter which way he turned, the keel continued to drag. "Row with all your might, boys," he shouted. "If we don't reach deeper water in 5 minutes, we're stuck." Sam and Henry leaned into their oars, and for a brief moment the boat glided through the tall marsh grass. But the keel was still dragging in the soft mud, and with the tide rapidly going out, the boat sank deeper with each passing minute. "Row as hard as you can," Tom urged, noticing their speed was quickly diminishing. "You're wiped out, Sam. Let me take your oar. Now, Henry, give it everything you've got." The oarsmen put all their strength into their task, driven by desperation, but the keel was now completely lodged in the mud, and the bottom of the boat rested in the thick, slimy ooze. No matter how hard they tried, the boys couldn't push her any further. "Stuck," Sam exclaimed. "Yep, stuck, completely stuck, and we're in for a night of it, fog or no fog," Tom replied. "What do we do now?" Henry asked. Not much we can do except try to sleep if we can. It's so cold and damp that may be tough. I wish we had brought some moss for blankets. But what if the fog lifts during the night? Henry worried. Well, what if it does? There's nothing we can accomplish until the tide comes in tomorrow morning. We're high and dry now, and the tide will keep going out until 1 or 2 o'clock tonight. Then it will turn, but we won't be floating again until nearly high tide, probably around 7 or 8 in the morning tomorrow. Right, Sam agreed. And since we've hardly eaten anything since morning and won't have anything to eat until we reach Ridgewood, we'll need all the strength we can gather from sleep. Let's try to get some sleep if we can. Settling in as comfortably as they could, the 3 exhausted, hungry boys did their best to sleep, but the chance of that was slim. No sooner had they stopped moving than the biting cold of the fog, which had already soaked through their thin clothes, made them shiver uncontrollably. They had to pick up the oars from time to keep their blood circulating, leaving no room for anything more than brief moments of rest. Just before dawn, the rain started pouring down, and Tom, who had been drifting off, suddenly jumped up, exclaiming, "What's that, rain? Yes." "Why, yes," Henry asked, shaking from the cold. "I'm already soaked." "Because if it rains heavily, the fog will clear away." "Why is that?" "It converts to rain and falls. Fog disappears either by rising and drifting off or by falling as rain, and it looks like this one is about to fall if I can judge by the way it's coming down now." And it really was coming down hard. The boys' situation became even more uncomfortable, but at least their outlook brightened, and as the steady rainfall cleared the thick fog, their spirits lifted despite the dismal circumstances. "Hey, Sam," Henry said, "are you a prophet or a weather wizard?" "Neither, as far as I know," Sam replied. "Why do you ask?" "Just because I think you either saw this fog coming or somehow conjured it." "I don't see why you think that," said Sam. "Don't you remember how you warned us about slips between the cup and the lip when Tom and I were so sure we'd reach Ridgewood?" "Yes, of course, but I didn't really expect anything like this. I was just speaking generally. Just sharing your wisdom, as always. But I won't tease you, because you were right. And besides," Tom added, "the situation right now isn't funny at all. I've got a steady stream of cold river water running down my back, and I'm definitely in for a serious lecture from Ma'am Lucy when I see her. She'll scold me for staying out too long, for wrecking the boat, for losing my boots, for ruining my clothes, and for everything else she can think of. And yet, believe it or not, I wish I could be sure of getting that lecture first thing this morning." Chapter 24. Daylight broke around 5 o'clock, and Tom took advantage of the first light to survey his surroundings and figure out where they were. The boat was so deeply entrenched in the tall marsh grass that he had to climb to the highest part of the bow just to get a glimpse of anything. At first, there wasn't much to see, but as the sky lightened, thanks to the rain finally stopping, by 6 o'clock he could make out their surroundings pretty clearly. "Hey, guys," he called to his friends, "we really nailed this one. If we had tried, with the brightest sunlight in the clearest day, we couldn't have placed the Aphrodite more perfectly in the middle of this marsh." A closer look confirmed his observation. The boat was indeed right in the center of a small island that stretched out 200 or 300 yards on either side. By 6:30, the tide had risen enough for the water to lap at the sides of the boat, but it would be at least another hour before the Aphrodite floated free from the mud. Even then, they'd have to wait a bit longer for deeper water before trying to push her bulk through the thick marsh grass. "Why not speed things up by getting out and pushing the empty boat?" suggested the impatient Henry, who had already proclaimed he was on the verge of starvation. "Just grab one of the oars, Henry," Tom replied, "and check how firm the bottom is." Henry took an oar, shoved it into the grass roots, and with hardly any effort, drove it straight down into the soft mud. "Yup, I see," he droned, pulling the oar back out. "This is exactly the kind of lawn you'd want to stroll on in slippers." At that moment, they heard the sound of oars paddling, and looking in the direction of the noise, Tom suddenly called out, "Hey, Ma'am Lucy, over here. Here we are, out here in the marsh." Then, turning to his friends, he said, "It's Ma'am Lucy in that little boat. I wonder where she's heading this early on a Sunday morning." Ma'am Lucy didn't make him wait long for an answer. She maneuvered her boat as far into the grass and as close to them as possible, stopping about 150 yards from the Aphrodite. Standing up in her boat, hands on her hips and her red turbaned head thrown back, she began, "Now listen here, young Tom. What do you think you're doing? Didn't you promise me you'd be back in a month? That month is up, and here you are, idling about on a marsh on a Sunday morning. You come right home this instant." After delivering her first breath of scolding mixed with affection, her usual way with Tom, the boy she had doted on since he was a baby, she paused just long enough for Tom to explain that he and his friends couldn't come to her until the tide rose at least another foot. "Now listen, boys," he said. "She'll keep this up until the rising tide brings her to us, and we're in for at least an hour of it. Why not convince her to go back and make breakfast while we wait?" Sam suggested. "Go back, not a chance. My month was up yesterday, and since I didn't show up, she set out to find me and bring me home this morning. You can bet she won't go home without me. She'll row this way as fast as the water lets her, and she'll keep on scolding and fussing over me the whole time. Then she'll jump in here and hug me like I'm her long-lost baby boy. Just listen." Ma'am Lucy lived up to Tom's prediction perfectly. As she got closer and saw the sorry state of the young Crusoes, realizing bit by bit just how tattered they had become, she scolded them more fiercely, while Tom found it all amusing and laughed heartily. He took care to point out the various losses he had suffered, occasionally hinting at the challenges he had faced and the dangers he had survived. Each of his words sparked a new topic for Ma'am Lucy's reprimands. As the little boat nudged up against the larger one, she leaped from one to the other, seamlessly shifting her tone, manner, and expression mid-sentence, saying something like this: "I swear, young Tom, if I get my hands on you, you troublesome, good-for-nothing scamp, oh, how happy your old Lucy is to wrap her arms around you again and hug you just like you were a baby. And now that I've got you safe in my arms again, I'm just so happy." The switch in her tone came just as Ma'am Lucy stepped from one boat to the other and engulfed Tom in that fierce affection only a beloved old nurse could possess. It was easy now to row out of the marsh, as the water deepened a bit, and then head home for a late but delightful breakfast. After that, they enjoyed a long day of complete relaxation, with the entire ordeal of the Red Bird's wreck fading into just a memory. The end.